Get you coffee. Well, I'm sure you've noticed, it's been a while. Far longer than I probably anticipated. No excuse really needs to be given other than to say that thankfully, life at this moment is different and probably better than it was a couple of years ago for most people. I started CoffeeTime in September of 2020, and I'm sure that you remember September of 2020. My family was in the midst of the chaos as was yours, and though the chaos that my family was experiencing was not exactly unique, we all were going through crazy times with all the COVID measures, but our situation was at least a little bit unique. My wife and I, we have 4 kids, and they now are 13, 12, 10, and almost 9, and if I'm doing the math correctly, then they were like 11, 10, 8, and about 7. And in addition to having 4 relatively young-ish kids, my wife is, or I should say was, an ICU nurse. I should say was because she recently left the ICU. When COVID started a little more than 2 years ago, my wife was working in the ICU, but she was also in grad school studying to become a nurse practitioner. And I was, and still am, pastoring a church in North San Diego County. And I also, along with my wife, was working on a graduate degree at a seminary here in Southern California called Gateway Seminary. We decided back in the middle of 2018 to go back to school. Well, actually, for my wife, it was going back to school, but school at least a higher education level for me. I didn't go to college or university, so going to grad school, it was the first time I was in that kind of environment. I went right into a ministry context right out of high school. So actually, I think that's the best route, but that's for another video. But as my wife prepared to go to school to do a master's degree in nursing, I decided to go to school to complete a Master of Divinity degree. And everything was actually going relatively smoothly by the end of 2019. She was coming to the final leg of her degree program, and I was just about to cross the halfway point of mine. And then the world chaotically spiraled nearly out of control. And by September of 2020, I felt like I was under house arrest. I was working almost entirely from home, other than recording messages for church online, because at that time, most churches, including ours, was online. I was working from here, and then I would go in and record messages and help record worship and all that sort of stuff for the church. My kids, who had been attending a normal, regular public school about 5 minutes from our home, they were effectively doing homeschool. So my wife was going to school 2 to 3 days a week, and then she was working in the ICU 3 to 4 days a week. And if it weren't for my parents and my wife's parents and some very close friends of ours who helped us manage our kids' education during that time, I'm not sure that we would have totally survived. So I felt like I was under house arrest, and I was sitting here in this office many hours a day. And I thought that I needed to find a different way to minister to people if I wasn't actively meeting them at the church offices week in and week out through ministry within the church facilities. So I started to record CoffeeTime. And when I began in September of 2020, I was writing, recording, editing, and posting 5 videos a week, Monday through Friday. And it was a pretty good amount of work. I did that for quite a few months, and I would probably still be doing that, but thankfully life has reached not a new normal, but I'd say like a new status quo. Our kids are basically back to school, regular school. My wife finished her NP program last year in May, and then she passed her state board exams last summer. She started a new job about a month ago, so she's no longer in the ICU, which is great because COVID for ICU nurses was kind of like combat. And I've been back to teaching at a local Bible college as well as teaching regular services at the church for about the last year or so. And so writing, producing, recording, editing 5 videos a week for YouTube just hasn't been possible, which isn't really a bad thing. Although I do regularly have people at the church and then subscribers through email or comments. They'll say to me, I miss my morning coffee, which I understand what that means. They're hoping that I'll start to post videos every single day again. And I do miss producing these videos as well. But at this moment, I'm about 7 weeks away from finishing my master's program. And my family and we are preparing to take the first real break and family vacation without any extra work that we have had in probably 4 or 5 years. Someone that I've been following online for the last 5 or 6 years, he says, work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing and see what happens. And I feel like that's what we have been doing, my wife and I, for the last 5 years. I wouldn't say that I've burnt out or that I am burnt out, but both my wife and we realized that working and running at 7,000 RPM for 2 solid years is pretty taxing. And though I'm finishing, finally, this master's program, I was accepted into a doctoral program that begins in January of next year. So having a break is something that seemed pretty nice. I read an article probably about 8 or 9 months ago now that said that 4 in 10 pastors were considering resigning from pastoral ministry after all that has happened due to COVID in the last couple of years. Now, I'm not one of those 40%, but I absolutely understand the feeling. The last 2 years have been hard for just about everyone, but there is something of an added layer of difficulty for those in the medical field, like my wife, or those that have kids at home, like my wife and me, or those in pastoral ministry trying to figure out how to navigate the landmines of COVID in a highly politically and emotionally charged environment, such as we have been living in the last couple of years. None of this is meant to be an excuse or like a sympathy grab. I'm simply trying to process all of the things that have gone on. I've had some conversations recently with guys who are former pastors who pastored churches prior to all that's happened in the last couple of years with COVID. And oftentimes they'll say the same thing. They'll say, I'm glad that I didn't have to lead through all of this. And I feel like I've learned a lot. I know in talking with other pastors who are walking through this, that we've all learned a lot. But at the same time, I'm not entirely sure that I can articulate everything that I feel that I've learned. Not quite yet. I really think that it is going to take probably the better part of 3 to 5 years for our culture to really begin to recognize how we as a culture have changed post-COVID, for us to actually process how we are different and what we have learned. But we've definitely been through a lot. And unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure that it is entirely over. The political landscape is still chaotic. Midterms are coming in a very short period of time. The geopolitical chaos seems to be increasing weekly. Economic chaos is crazy and getting crazier. I spent $151 to fill up my gas tank yesterday. The prophet Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 40, he writes there, comfort, yes, comfort my people, says your God. Speak comfort to Jerusalem and cry to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. Now, the context of this word of comfort is interesting. This is right after the Assyrians nearly obliterated the nation of Judah, and it is on the precipice of the Babylonians coming to do the same within less than a century and a half. Chaos has just happened to Judah, and more chaos is coming. And in the midst of that, kind of like in the eye of the storm, they've already gone through one storm, another storm is coming. In the eye of the storm, the word of God is comfort. Yes, comfort my people, says your God. I don't think that we are done with the chaos of the 2020s. So there's more to come, more chaos to come. The economy, there's a lot that's going to be happening there. Politically, there's a lot that will go on. There's a lot more to come. So there's more coffee time to come. It's not done. I'm just trying to kind of regather my mind after all that has gone on. Thank you to all you who subscribe. I will have more content coming out. I love you all. And may God bless you on this Good Friday. Sunday's a coming. We'll see you next time.